Hello and welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Carrie Hazley and today is June 23rd, 2020. There are multiple ways that you can get a hold of us if you would like weather information. The first is the Alaska Weather Information line, that number 1-800-472-0391. Now we do see continued effects with the power outage that impacted the Alaska Weather Information line on Saturday, where sometimes information isn't updating quite as quickly as it should. We do know about this and our IT staff is working to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. So if you call that number and you get old information, feel free to drop me an email at carrie.hazley@noaa.gov and let me know that you're experiencing issues so that I can pass those on. Hopefully we get that fixed though within the later part of today or into tomorrow morning. Now you can always find weather information on the web at weather.gov/Alaska, where you'll find all of our current watches, warnings, and advisories. Now moving on, let's start by taking a look at hazardous weather conditions or watches, warnings, and advisories across the state. The active area is in the interior where we've seen widespread rainfall, and then we actually have pretty benign conditions up along the Arctic coast, the west coast, and south central. No watches, warnings, and advisories in effect in those areas. Also no watches, warnings, and advisories in effect down over the Panhandle. So the easiest way to look at what's going on out across the state is to zoom into the interior. All of these products are for flooding because we've had considerable rainfall across much of the interior over the last couple of days. So the area in orange, that's a flood watch, in most places valid until the day on Friday. And then all of the areas in red, those are individual flood warnings. So let's just work our way from west to east across the screen here and go over each one of these briefly. So starting out west, that is a flood warning for the Tanana River at Nenana, and it is valid until just after noon on Thursday of this week. Rising water levels over the next couple of days, and we expect low-lying areas to be impacted by that rising water. Also along the Tanana River, there's a warning in effect for the Tanana River just to the southwest of Fairbanks there. That's only in effect until 9 o'clock tomorrow, although we are expecting river levels to remain high along the Tanana, and then for those higher water levels to continue to work their way downstream. Moving further east, we have a flood warning out along the Salcha River, and that one is for rising water levels and expected to remain high along the Salcha through at least Friday. Now the Salcha River warning, that one's valid until 8:30 p.m. on Wednesday. Moving on here, we do have another flood warning in effect. This one valid along the Goodpaster River near Delta Junction and valid until 11 p.m. on Thursday night. And we are expecting all areas along the Goodpaster River to flood, and then we could see some maybe low-lying areas or some cottages or roadways around that particular area to be impacted. Finally, out along the Alcan border, we have one other flood warning. This one is the 40 Mile River and the surrounding area there. That one valid until Tuesday, 10:15 p.m. on Tuesday night, where river levels have peaked, but they continue to remain high. Switching gears here, we go from quite a bit of extra water to fire danger, and we'll take a look now at the current fire danger across the state. The good news is that with all of this rain we've had, the potential for really large fires across the state is actually very low. So this is a fire danger for any fires. Most of these would be something triggered by just dry ground and then a lightning strike, and the greatest possibility for that to occur is going to be in parts of the Tanana Valley and then also down over parts of the Copper River Valley as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. Also some potential for some fire starts in the northwestern part of the state where we have dry conditions. Although colder than normal conditions, it is quite dry there. So some potential just to the north of Kotzebue in the inland areas, and then also in inland areas along the Seward Peninsula there. Some potential, at least in the next 24 to 48 hours, for some small fires to start. Now, as far as the overall weather pattern goes, wet is the theme, and we do see widespread cloud cover across much of mainland Alaska today, most of that moving from northwest to southeast along a stationary boundary that we'll take a look at here in just a minute, where we're seeing considerable shower activity and then also in some places some widespread rainfall. It's an area of low pressure that shows up on satellite just to the south of Kodiak Island. That's going to work its way into the Gulf of Alaska and will spread more in the way of precipitation as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours along the Gulf Coast. So let's take a look at the service map first just to see where we're starting out at. Lots of green across the state, and much of that is just in the form of showers, not so much widespread continuous rain. And we're also seeing some thunderstorms pop up across parts of the interior today. Out along the west coast where we see some cloud cover, there is some fog that's occurred mostly along the St. Lawrence Island area, also some fog up along the Arctic coast, places where conditions are generally drier. Now you do see some blue on your map, that means snow, and we are seeing some snow at higher elevations across the Wrangels, also some snow at higher elevations across the Brooks Range, and some snow pushing its way into the west coast of northwest coast of mainland Alaska. So overnight tonight we will look for those wet conditions to persist across much of the interior, which is going to continue feeding those rivers that are already running high. Snow developing up along the northwest coast and also parts of the Brooks Range, where we could also see some fog develop through the overnight hours. South central Alaska and then also eventually southeast Alaska, you're going to be impacted by this area of low pressure that's near Kodiak Island, with the greatest potential for precipitation to be on the eastern Kenai Peninsula and then down along the Gulf Coast. And that particular system kind of lingers as we get into the day on Wednesday, and then we see the next weather maker pushing its way into the Pacific here, showing up there on the bottom part of your map, an area of low pressure by Wednesday that just kind of gets into the southern part of our area of concern. Across mainland Alaska, widespread precipitation, mostly again in the form of shower activity, lingers through the day on Wednesday, and we will see more in the way of thunderstorms pop up in the Tanana and the Copper River Valley, again creating some potential for some lightning strikes to cause some small fires to start. Wet down in the Panhandle as we get into the day on Wednesday with showers, but then they really start to get wet as we get into the day on Thursday with that frontal boundary and that weather system pushing its way into the Panhandle. So by Thursday, we will look for those wet conditions across the Panhandle, and then we also look for winds to pick up a bit along the Gulf Coast, especially in some of the channels there. And then we look for continued shower activity across the Panhandle. Behind this cold front, temperatures are awfully cool, in fact, considerably cooler than normal, and then drier out along the west coast. Again, a few thunderstorms in the interior, and then high pressure dominates the weather for Thursday up along the Arctic coast. So with this high pressure up over the Arctic and this cold front that's just kind of stalled out across mainland Alaska, temperatures really are the story right now. So Wednesday morning, that's tomorrow morning when we start off our day, we see temperatures below freezing all along the Arctic coast and through a good part of northwest mainland Alaska. In the vicinity of Kotzebue Sound and the Seward Peninsula, we'll look for temperatures to hover right around the freezing point. Nome, your overnight low tonight is 34. Across the interior, we will look for the overnight low temperatures tonight to be mostly in the 40s, 52 up in Fort Yukon, 47 in Fairbanks, and then down over the Bristol Bay area, temperatures around 45 in most places. Panhandle sites overnight tonight, temperatures in the upper 40s. Through the day on Wednesday, we do see a good bit of warming trend across much of mainland Alaska, with the warmest spot being Fort Yukon at 67 degrees for a Wednesday high, and then temperatures in the low to mid 60s across parts of south central Alaska and then also parts of the eastern interior. Cold temperatures, though, stick around up on the Arctic coast where we see them just break freezing, and then also the northwestern part of mainland there around Kotzebue Sound, Seward Peninsula. Temperatures there also stay in the 30s, which is quite a bit cooler than is normal for this time of year. Dry conditions out there combined with cool weather. Now across southwestern mainland Alaska, we are seeing temperatures there also drop below what is normal, and that trend's going to continue as we get into the later part of the week. Temperatures in the 50s for much of southwest Alaska. And then across the south central area, temperatures also just really going to struggle to break 60 for the high on Wednesday. Down over the Panhandle, temperatures also in the 50s with that wet pattern. Now let's take a look at Thursday. It stays cold for those Thursday morning lows up along the Arctic coast, where we see a lot of temperatures just hovering right around freezing, and we start to see those 30s work their way a bit further south along the west coast, where we do see down along the southwestern part of the state just barely getting above 40 in some places. Bethel 40 for your Thursday morning low, and then across the central part of the interior, temperatures just in the low 40s. Same for south central, 40s along the Aleutians, and then also 40s across the Panhandle for Thursday morning. So warming up into the interior on Thursday afternoon, temperatures still kind of get just above 60, especially in the eastern part of the interior, where we'll see again those thunderstorms but continued wet weather, but considerably cooler than normal temperatures out along the southwestern part of mainland Alaska, where some places won't break 50 degrees for their high on Thursday. So mid-50s, 54 for Bethel, and then 49 for the high temperature on Thursday up at Nome. Arctic coast, your highs just barely get above freezing there with AKwx 34 and then 38 down at Dead Horse. Across the Panhandle on Thursday, we'll see temperatures warm their way up just to the 50s with widespread rain.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And moving on to aviation weather now, we start by taking a look at flight categories across the state to kick off Wednesday morning, where we'll have widespread low conditions across much of mainland Alaska, marginal VFR conditions all along the Alaska Range, through a good part of the western interior along that frontal boundary that's out there. Also some lower conditions, marginal VFR out along the Alcan border, and then as you move up towards the Brooks Range, IFR conditions, we'll also see those stretch out towards the Dead Horse and Nuiqsut area there. IFR conditions down in Bristol Bay, and also over towards Cordova, Yakutat, and then down into the northern part of the Panhandle, IFR conditions to kick off Wednesday morning. IFR conditions out over the far western part of the Aleutians and Bering Sea as well. Gradual improvement across a good portion of the area as we go into the Wednesday afternoon time frame, where we will see IFR conditions continue to linger out along the western part of the Bering Sea and also parts of the Aleutians. Also a little bit of some IFR lingering on the Pacific side there of the Alaska Peninsula, although most any other place that had some IFR, they should at least improve to marginal, if not all the way back up to VFR conditions. We will see our lowest conditions across the southern part of the state as we see a pretty active weather pattern with precipitation in that particular area, and then in the interior more in the way of VFR conditions as we go to Wednesday afternoon, with thunderstorms popping up over the Alaska Range and parts of the Tanana Valley. Now going into Thursday morning and those overnight hours as we get into the Thursday time frame, IFR conditions still stay out over the Aleutians and parts of the Bering Sea, and then we also see a few areas with those IFR conditions pop up along the Arctic coast, maybe some along the terrain down along the Kenai Peninsula, and then over towards the Valdez-Cordova area there in the mountains. Also the northern part of the Panhandle returning to IFR conditions to kick off the Thursday morning. Marginal VFR conditions over a good portion of the southern part of the state and also all along the Arctic and parts of the Brooks Range. Improvement again for the Thursday, where we'll see the lowest conditions primarily offshore and then out along the Aleutians and over the Bering Sea. Also keeping marginal VFR conditions for Thursday down over the southeast Alaska Panhandle and much of the Gulf, with VFR conditions over a good portion of the interior and thunderstorms again kicking up in the Tanana and Copper River valleys. Now to take a look at our past conditions Wednesday morning, Anaktuvuk, you'll be IFR. It could improve up to a marginal VFR as we go through the later part of the day. Same is going to be true for Adigan, IFR to marginal VFR. And then out along the Alaska Range now, we start down at Lake Clark, marginal VFR for Wednesday. Merrill starting off the day at IFR, improving to marginal VFR. Moving on around the horn here, Rainy Pass, marginal VFR for Wednesday. Same is going to be true there for Windy Pass. Now as far as Isabel Pass goes, they'll start off the day at marginal VFR with some precipitation lingering there along the mountains, improving to VFR by afternoon, maybe some thunderstorms popping up as we get into the afternoon hours. And then Metasta Pass, VFR. Tanita Pass shall be marginal VFR for most of the day on Wednesday. Portage Pass, IFR conditions, and then down over the Panhandle, we'll start the day off with IFR conditions in White and Chilkoot Pass. We'll see those both improve to marginal VFR. Now for freezing levels, the surface line is all the way up on the northern edge of the Brooks Range, stretching up towards the Arctic coast. And then over most of mainland Alaska, we see those freezing levels between that 4,000 and 6,000 foot mark. As we head down towards the Panhandle, we see the freezing levels come up just a bit, 6,000 6,000 to 8,000 feet. And then over the Aleutians and the Bering, we see freezing levels continue to raise up higher as you go further west, so 8,000 to 10,000 by the time you get out towards Shemya. Now, as far as icing goes, this does look like a lot of ice on the map. It is a very active pattern as far as precipitation goes. So any place we've got thunder showers popping up, or just those bubbling thunderstorms that we see in the afternoon, those imply the potential for some icing, and then all of these other weather systems will trigger some at least isolated moderate ice potential as well. The greatest chance for moderate ice tomorrow is going to be over the western part of the interior, and that along the Gulf Coast, where we'll see the bulk of our precipitation. And then as far as our upper level winds go, let's start here with a look at the jet stream. Strongest upper level winds are going to be out over the Gulf of Alaska and then further down over the North Pacific. Also a weak jet up over the Arctic, where we do see winds peaking out just offshore at about 90 knots. Stepping down to 9,000 feet now, we do see some fairly strong winds across the interior up to about 35 knots there. And then 25 knots down over the Panhandle. Everything else pretty light over much of the flying airspace. Same as really true as we step down to 3,000 feet, maybe some 25 knotters over the southwestern part of mainland Alaska and just offshore. And what that's going to translate into is a pretty weak turbulence pattern as we get into the day on Wednesday, with the greatest possibility for turbulence to actually occur inside any thunderstorms or there around them, and then isolated moderate over the western interior below about 4,000 feet.
It's kind of hard to explain how important weather is to our job. I mean, it really affects everything we do.
In 2018, NOAA launches the GOES-S satellite, which takes its place in orbit as GOES-17. Working together with GOES-16, the two new geostationary weather satellites will provide constant watch over the United States and the Western Hemisphere, from the west coast of Africa all the way to New Zealand, helping monitor severe storms, wildfires, and daily weather patterns. Since its launch, NOAA's GOES-16 satellite has already demonstrated its critical capability for keeping our nation weather ready. Throughout the active 2017 hurricane season, GOES-16 delivered imagery with detail and clarity never achieved before, with 4 times greater resolution than previous NOAA satellites, and delivered this imagery faster than ever before, helping forecasters predict the path of a storm and where and when it will intensify. These accurate and timely forecasts allowed for emergency managers to prepare for evacuations, map flood areas, and save lives.
So the weather matters. The weather matters before the weather happens, and the weather matters after the event happens, because what we're able to do to prepare, allocate resources, provide information to the public through the media beforehand, and what we're able to do afterwards, how and when the waters are going to recede, so we know we can get vehicles with life-saving food and shelter equipment down a particular highway. All of that depends on the forecast.
In the GOES West position, GOES-17 will be able to provide critical data for the westernmost United States, Alaska, and Hawaii.
We're talking about getting data updates in just seconds, so we can quickly spot wildfires and closely monitor the wind direction and their intensity. The crispness of the data coming in at a faster rate will also help with fog forecasts. We can see the moment the stratus starts to develop or when it starts to move out.
Like GOES-16, GOES-17 carries a suite of advanced instruments, including tools for sophisticated Earth sensing, lightning detecting, solar imaging, and space weather monitoring. As an equal partner in the sky, GOES-17 will expand coverage of the advanced baseline imager technology across the Pacific Ocean, allowing meteorologists and local officials to see severe weather systems developing in real time.
So instead of seeing something, say, this large, that as you zoom in actually gets kind of blurry, you're actually going to see something that is much more detailed.
In its GOES West position, GOES-17 will be able to monitor conditions in the western U.S. like wildfires, coastal fog, and atmospheric rivers when storms from the Pacific dump heavy rain and snow over the western U.S. GOES-17 will have a major impact on fighting wildfires in California. Up-to-the-minute information and crisp detail allows forecasters to spot fires faster than ever before, even before the first 911 calls come in, and to better track and predict the path of large, dynamic, and dangerous fires.
It's amazing to see what we can get and at the level of detail and the speed that we can get the information down into the ground that makes our decision making way more accurate.
With a view of the Pacific Ocean, GOES-17 will also provide a critical eye over shipping lanes vital to the U.S. economy, protecting cargo and passenger vessels from dangerous ocean storms. GOES-17 will also provide a high-definition view over Alaska, resulting in better weather forecasts and improved monitoring of sea ice, wildfires, and volcanic ash. The advanced baseline imager on GOES-17 can distinguish between clouds, sea ice, and snow cover, a critical need during Alaska's dark, cloudy winter months. GOES-17's geostationary lightning mapper monitors lightning flashes, including the in-cloud lightning most prevalent in severe storms, helping forecasters determine when a storm is forming, intensifying, and becoming more dangerous. Thanks to GOES-17, emergency managers will be equipped with more accurate weather predictions and faster warnings, providing a real impact, saving lives, and protecting infrastructure. Watching over Earth from 22,300 miles above, GOES-S will provide vital data to our weather-ready nation.
Hi, I'm JPSS. I'm a high-tech weather satellite that orbits our planet. I do something called a polar orbit. I circle the Earth from North Pole to South Pole, over and over, while the Earth spins. While I do that, I get lots of information about what's going on around the globe. I watch storms, clouds, and rain. I take the temperature of the ocean, measure air quality, ozone health, and take pictures of the land and sea. This information is used for all kinds of things. It helps us take care of our coasts and oceans and all the amazing things that live there. It helps us monitor harmful weather events like floods and droughts and measure the health of the environment. Most importantly, it helps us predict weather 3 to 7 days in the future. That means I can be a big help ahead of storms, where future warnings are important. I send information to the National Weather Service. They use the information to create forecasts. The forecasts are shared with people all over the country to help prepare for weather emergencies. So you look to the sky and wave. I'll be flying by.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back now. Let's take a look at marine weather conditions across the state of Alaska, starting off with a look at the sea ice conditions. And here's the latest 5-day forecast from our ice program. Now, we do see ice up along a good portion of the Arctic coast still, with 80% or greater concentration in a lot of places, especially over from AKwx to the Kaktovik area. In other places along the Arctic coast, we are starting to see less in the way of concentration, especially there Wainwright down towards that Point Lay area. We have some smaller areas of ice that continue to linger. We are getting reports that there is a thin band of ice between Wales over towards Kotzebue Sound, still holding on to the coast. Also a few pieces of ice lingering in Kotzebue Sound itself, others up around the Point Hope area. Now, as far as the next 5 days go, we will look for the main ice edge to actually work its way slightly south, about 25 to 30 nautical miles over the 5-day time frame. Now, this just because of a cold front that's going to turn the winds over to be more northerly than anything else out of the or over this particular time frame, but we will continue to see some gradual erosion of the ice pack itself. Now, for marine weather conditions, we'll start by taking a look down over the Panhandle, where we will see weather start to get more active as we go through the next couple of days. Starting off, though, with a look at conditions tomorrow. Winds mainly onshore on the outer coastal areas, and we'll see those range from a 10 up to about 15 knots. In the inner waters, they're 10 knots. Most of those are going to be out of the south, although as you get in the very northern part of the Panhandle, more of a southerly flow. up to about 10 knots, and then we will see most of our seas stay in the range of about 4 to 5 feet. Pretty big change as we get into the day on Thursday is that frontal boundary that is moving in starts to approach the area where we'll see waves start to pick up to about 10 feet, maybe 11 feet out along the outer coastal waters, and then winds picking up as well, primarily out of the south in most places, 25 to 30 knots, and then on the inner waters we'll see them range more like 15 to 25 knots. Now for Wednesday over the south central area, we will see winds primarily out of the east for much of the Cook Inlet area at 10 knots and then 2 feet seas. A bit stronger as you get down to the mouth of Cook Inlet, so we'll see those winds out of the southeast up to about 15 knots and 3 feet seas, and then a bit stronger for the winds in the seas out over the northern part of the Gulf of Alaska, and we'll see most of those winds out of the south with seas up to about 6 feet. Again, big change as we get into the day on Thursday with that frontal system approaching. So for the Cook Inlet area, we'll look for winds to stay out of the northeast. There's some seas picking up to about 4 feet, winds between 15 and 20. And then it's really the Gulf of Alaska that we see the greatest change, where we'll see seas between 9 and 10 feet and then winds up as high as about 30 knots. Moving further west to take a look at the Alaska Peninsula for the day on Wednesday, a pretty calm day with winds ranging between 10 and 15 knots, kind of all over the place in terms of direction, and seas between 3 and 5 feet. A little bit of an increase as we get into the day on Thursday because of that weather system, but that system is tracking further to the east, so it'll really be Kodiak Island that gets kind of the brunt of this weather as we get into the day on Thursday. We will see winds come out of the northeast over the marine areas through Shelikof Strait up to about 20 knots there, 7-foot seas, and then on the Pacific side we'll look for winds up to 25 knots and 9-foot seas over Bristol Bay, 15 knots and 2-foot seas. Moving further out the chain now for your Wednesday, pretty calm day out there with winds again kind of all over the place in terms of direction, between 10 and 15 knots, and pretty small seas here, 3 to 5 feet in most places, 6 feet on the Pacific side as you get from Nikolsky over towards Unalaska, and then not a lot of change as we go into the day on Thursday, although we will see most of the winds at this point be primarily out of the south to southwest up to about 15 knots, but again those weaker seas, 4 to 5 feet, do persist for Thursday. Up the west coast for the day on Wednesday, winds primarily out of the north between 15 and 20 knots, and then we will see our seas between 3 and 6 feet, and then not a lot of change for the day on Thursday. We keep those northerly winds, 10 to 15 knots in most places for our seas. 10 to 15 knots in most places for our winds, and then 4 feet for our seas. And then as we go further up into the Arctic, again, ice still holding on over a good portion of the coast there, where we will see a little bit of a push from the Utqiagvik area to be kind of out of the south, just briefly on Wednesday, up to 10 knots. And then as we get further around the coast, that's where we start to really see those northerly winds kind of picking up, 10 to 20 knots. And then as we get into the day on Thursday, more of an easterly flow for the day on Thursday, 15 knots, and then further around the coast there, winds stay out of the north between 10 and 15 knots. And then for a quick recap, tonight we do have low pressure dominating the weather over a good portion of mainland Alaska, where we will see a few scattered thunderstorms lingering and a lot of widespread scattered showers. Also showery weather down along the Gulf Coast. Thank you and have a great night.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.